Wayne Stephenson, who's Director for Environment and Climate at London Borough of Hounslow, and is going to help us navigate the sort of big picture and bring the local authority perspective to bear. We'll then turn to Jessica Lobo of the UN Global Compact Network UK. Jessica's going to put climate action in the context of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, as well as giving us a bit of a flavour of how Race to Zero is developing nationally as a campaign, and also what the COP26 summit has in store. We'll then hear from Simon Stromberg of Olwg, who are a startup company based in Brentford, but with a huge body of expertise in this area, and an organisation that is very committed to building these net zero ambitions into the way that they do business. So we'll get more of a flavour of their approach later on. And then we'll hear from my colleague, Jane Mossman from West London Business, who's going to talk us through the Race to Zero West London campaign and the toolkit that's been developed to help you set out on this journey. Finally, Jane will probably be handing over to Martina from Climax Community, who will introduce the Climate Essentials tool, which is there to help you baseline assess the carbon footprint of your business and start to map out what your pathway to zero might look like. So, as I said, a packed hour and a half ahead. Time for your questions at the end. But without further ado, my pleasure to give a warm welcome to Wayne Stephenson, who's going to set the scene from Hounslow's perspective. Wayne.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm just bear with me a moment while I bring my screen into view. Andrew, could you advise if that's visible?
It's visible. I think if you click on the full screen sort of mode, from the beginning, that should take it. Yeah, that's perfect. Away you go.
There we go. So thank you very much to West London Business and the panel for inviting me along to speak today. My name is Wayne Stephenson. I'm Director of Environment and Climate at Hounslow. I'm privileged to look after both a number of local services in terms of waste management, highways provision, and our parks and green spaces. But I'm also responsible for the climate, tackling the climate emergency, and doing so in a way that enables sort of businesses and others to really benefit from taking these more sort of green options. And obviously we do all of this in the context of the year or so that we've had, which has obviously been extremely challenging. So we're also looking at that from the perspective of the recovery that needs to take place across our economy and communities. So I'll take you through sort of the green perspective of recovery as I go through the presentation as well. So I'll take you through. Hounslow Council has declared a climate emergency in June 2019, and since that time we've been working hard against achieving our overall aim, and that's for the borough as a whole to be net zero by 2030. And we've adopted purposely an approach that enables us to work with businesses and our communities, and particularly in the context of green recovery, how we deliver a green economic recovery, but also that transformation for the wider borough as well. So hopefully after my presentation, you'll have further insight into our work. So very briefly, I'll take you through some of the sort of stats and information around the climate emergency declaration. So we know from our analysis that and our work to engage communities across the borough, and that took around sort of 12 months to sort of take that work from the point of sort of initiation through to that declaration and then the climate emergency action plan. We know that 79% of our direct emissions come from gas, and that a large proportion of that is from council-owned assets as well. and electricity use is much lower. So this starts to talk about sort of the infrastructure that we need to develop and the way we need to work with our businesses and communities to bring forward that transformation, not only of those sort of publicly owned assets and buildings, but also how we support sort of homeowners, businesses, business owners, and others to really sort of benefit from this drive as well, and obviously sort of offset some of those wider challenges. In terms of those wider borough emissions, quite a large proportion. Now, this is not to say that businesses are the big polluters there, because we know that we know that our own assets as a council produce quite a lot of emissions as well. But we can see that a third of the borough-wide emissions are really sort of related to the business and commercial sector, and it's worth sort of exploring that in more detail. We can see from the pie chart here, and I won't go through this sort of segment by segment. You'll be able to review these slides after the session as well, but hopefully some of the insights that this provides. We can see that the largest sort of segment of that sort of the territorial emissions relates to sort of large industrial installations, and so on and so forth. It goes through sort of domestic gas and other fuels, and then industry and commercial gas. These are some of the sort of the biggest areas of pollution, shall we say. So our climate emergency action plan, it outlined 7 key programs for the council to work on and do so across our sort of own assets, and these are sort of termed council direct emissions. So we focus those efforts on energy efficiency, renewable energy, electrifying our vehicle fleet, reducing employee transport, waste management, the culture and change and governance that needs to take place across the council. And some of this is exampled by sort of adopting more local and green sort of procurement practices. So these are some of the sort of early examples of change that we're seeing. And also we then look at it from a perspective of the wider borough, and some of our interventions in the action plan are focused around retrofitting Hounslow, so touching on that sort of gas infrastructure and how we might change that moving forward to more renewable energy sources, promotion of sustainable and active travel in the borough. Obviously air quality comes into that, and that's really important for our communities, especially now we have sort of coroner's reports that state that's a real factor, and probably something that environmentalists have known for years, and the council's has concerns about, but we've had unfortunate circumstances that now bring that very much to light. And I know that the GLA are working with local authorities across London to develop some guidance in what we might do with our road network. We do need to think about sort of a transition to alternative sort of mobility options. So we mentioned electric here, but more technologies are coming on board, and obviously that active travel can bring in sort of non-polluting solutions, cycling and the like. We are looking at greening and creating a more resilient borough, so we need to think about sort of flood management, and clearly, you know, developing net zero lifestyles is an area that business and our community and the council really need to work closely together to bring about the kind of societal and behavioural changes that we need to see as we move on. So broadly, we are looking at sustainable sort of funding and investment, and Hounslow Council is working closely with the GLA and all of our sort of London Borough partners, and through London Councils, which is the association that works for London boroughs. We're sort of taking forward and leading that work across London to develop a sort of green and sustainable economy, and that very much ties in with the Mayor of London and the GLA desire for a Green New Deal, and essentially sort of cutting to the point on that one. It's about creating sort of an economic system that has a much more sort of focused balance around social, environmental and economic opportunities, and ensuring that all of those do not sort of, one doesn't override many other factors, which could be argued has been the case of our economic system for many years. We are seeing many different sort of investment funds and investment opportunities coming forward, and we are exploring those from a green perspective, and thinking about what we can do as a local borough to support businesses in the change that they need to make as well. And there'll certainly be some work coming forward just a little later on this year, where we'll be, and this is really the start of that process of engagement with our businesses, so that we can sort of refine our offer to business, and how we might sort of help and support businesses to make that transition to a more green approach. The borough has already been successful in multi-million-pound bids to start the process of decarbonising our council estate and our council assets and buildings, and we're already seeing investment come locally into sort of new fleet, and that work will continue and that transformation will continue. But essentially, as a council, we're looking to sort of both provide that sort of leadership guide in terms of how small, medium, large businesses can transition, obviously with the council being a large organisation, but we're also looking at sort of stimulating that green recovery. The green recovery, in a sense, was brought about to, you know, Hounslow Council wanted to be bold, ambitious, and be a catalyst for change in London and indeed beyond. But we must also sort of retain that focus locally on our local businesses and how we support our businesses to develop. What we was also very conscious of is that, you know, in 2019, when the declaration of a climate emergency was conceived in the borough, and then subsequently when it was approved in sort of very early 2020, it took on sort of that challenge of the climate emergency, but clearly since then we've had COVID as well. So we've very much focused on developing a green recovery strategy, and this is available online for you to review. A simple Google of Hounslow's green recovery strategy will sort of direct you straight to sort of the document that explains what I'm saying today in a little bit more detail. But the green recovery for Hounslow is very much about stimulating our local economy, bringing about sort of low carbon travel and mobility around the borough, creating sort of green growth. So this is very much sort of linked to creating that low carbon economy as well. And by doing so, we're focusing on interventions such as creating a green enterprise zone in the borough, and creating a green skills academy, because very much we're conscious that, and we're very hopeful that the scale of investment, certainly in retrofitting, redesign, development, and other aspects of the council's work, such as landscaping, fleets, and things like that, will require a massive sort of upskilling of our community. And we want sort of businesses to come on that journey with us. And a key part of that overall strategy is thinking about our low sort of carbon neighborhoods as well. So here, what we're proposing to take forward in developing the green recovery strategy, we engage with a wide range of sort of academics, community members, other sort of interested organisations such as West London Business and others, and we participated in a range of sort of innovation labs, which really got us to the position where we could develop the green recovery strategy that we have. And these are the 4 themes that we held innovation labs on. Now, I'm very hopeful that as we move towards COP26, we'll be exploring sort of investable propositions across the borough. And I think there's a space for us to run some targeted innovation labs with business. And again, today is the start of sort of planting that seed of some further work that we can do with business to really sort of expand out and enrich the challenges that already exist within our green recovery strategy. And in a sense, our work around, you know, neighbourhoods are our strong sort of link to a whole range of policies, planning policies, transport policies, the GLA sort of range of environmental transport and building policies. And essentially, at the local level, that manifests itself as in our low carbon neighbourhoods. And clearly, one of our sort of key flagship projects is to develop a 15-minute neighbourhood. So this will start to, we're exploring that at the moment. We're doing some more definition around that work to create a vision for what a 15-minute neighbourhood in Hounslow would look like. And clearly, you know, one of the sort of basis for that is that whole sort of shop local or seek local solutions, how you know, our businesses, our services, our healthcare, how we can make that really accessible within sort of a 15-minute stroll from people's houses, or by whatever means that people get around. So our businesses are going to be critical to that, but thinking about our borough as a space and a geographical area, thinking about the borough as one that aims to be sort of an exemplar, so something that can be sort of replicated across London, across other cities, is really sort of the council's ambition. And again, businesses, high streets, our industrial areas are critical to the way we form that moving forward, as well as all these other benefits that you can see on this cycle. The low carbon economy, absolutely sort of critical piece of work.
2 minutes left, Wayne.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for the warning. So the low carbon economy is really that essential space, and we've listed here some of the projects that we're aiming to take forward, and it's only through working with business that these things can be truly achieved, and working with our academic partners and others. So I really wanted to highlight today the creation of this green enterprise zone, the work that's going to be done with businesses and others to form that. And obviously working with West London and our West London partners across West London, we are looking at sort of really promoting the innovation district, but the green business within that as well. And there's a whole series of other benefits from this work where we're looking to provide sort of green toolkits for businesses in the borough, identifying sort of accreditation opportunities, and really doing some really sort of strong support of SMEs, new companies, and welcoming those green businesses to the borough, but also helping our existing businesses transform into more green ways of working. Transport goes on, but I won't go through each of these slides initially. So essentially, it comes down to a we will, and we ask others to join in this process. And some of the things that we're looking for are switching to renewable energy, reducing organizations' footprints, recruiting locally and supporting our local communities, sourcing goods and services that are produced in a local way and in a sustainable way, transition to electric or other fleets, encourage your employees to use sustainable modes of transport, and reduce and recycle your waste. And to help businesses do that in the borough later on in this financial year, so probably early in 2022, we're developing a commercial waste business to support our businesses further as well. I bring that to a close, Andrew.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Wayne. Huge amounts of ground covered there, and I think a strong sense for everyone of the huge ambition in Hounslow to really drive this change to a green economy at a pace. And I noted your open invitation for ideas around investable propositions that could be taken to COP26 from the private sector as well as the public sector, which is perhaps a question for us to come back to if time allows later on. But without further ado, it's my great pleasure to welcome Jessica, Lobo of the UN Global Compact Network UK. Jessica, as I said in my intro, is going to help put climate change in the context of the wider United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, give you a bit more of a flavour of what Race to Zero is about, as well as introducing the COP26 summit. So over to you, Jessica.
Thanks so much, Andrew, and thanks for the introduction. Yes, I work at the UN Global Compact Network UK, and my role is to really support businesses to drive sustainability and, well, I suppose, create the world that we want. So I'm really delighted to join you today to talk about this agenda. So a little bit about us. We're the UN Global Compact, which is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative. We have over 13,000 companies over the world who have made the commitment to our 10 principles to support sustainability. And I think if we go on to the next slide, thank you, you'll be able to see these universal principles which are derived from UN treaties in these 4 areas, so human rights, labour, environment and anti-corruption. So I work in the UK network, and our role is to support all of our UK-based members to operationalise those 10 principles, to report annually on their progress, and to support the wider UN development agenda. And at the moment, that wider UN development agenda is best represented by the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So what are they? Next slide, please. So the Sustainable Development Goals, or you may hear them being called the SDGs or the Global Goals, they were passed in 2015, following on from the Millennium Development Goals, and they outlined these 17 goals that the world needs to achieve by 2030. The goals are really closely interlinked, but together they'll bring about the future that we want. So fighting inequalities, tackling climate change, and creating a better world. And you can see that they are really diverse in the types of things that they're trying to achieve. So got some environmental things there, like protecting life below water, taking climate action, some social things like no poverty, striving for gender equality, and perhaps some things more looking at the economy, so decent work and economic growth. And beneath these 17 goals sit 169 targets and then 232 indicators that help us measure our progress against them. So this 2030 agenda was agreed by all UN member states after the largest consultation ever undertaken by the UN. There was literally tens of thousands of stakeholders who contributed. And the goals apply to all countries, but I suppose while it was government that made the commitment, achieving these goals is going to require support from everybody, really, and in particular the business community. The problem is, after 5 years, we are not delivering progress towards the goals at the pace or scale that's needed. So there's some quite, I guess, scary stats up there on the slide. And we're now seeing the impact of COVID-19 intertwined with some of these long-standing social and economic inequalities. And there's a real missed opportunity, really, that if we'd have been working on this agenda before the pandemic, we would have been better equipped to deal with it. So we would have been better equipped with more protections in the informal economy, more universal access to healthcare, more inclusive and sustainable societies, more resilient businesses. Next slide, please. I think the good news is that we're seeing a lot of engagement by businesses across these Sustainable Development Goals. But there's a critical performance gap between the action that businesses are taking right now and the global and societal needs that are defined by these SDGs. So there was a study that was done and found that only 39% of companies have targets that they believe are sufficiently ambitious or science-based. So that means, for example, a business may be setting targets to reduce their carbon emissions, but those targets and the action that they're taking isn't actually sufficient enough to be able to limit global temperatures to a safe amount. So that's, I guess, a bit of the global picture. Let's go on to the next slide and look at what's happening nationally and locally. Specifically in the UK, we have a lot to do on this agenda. And on the left-hand side of the screen here is a study in 2018, which found that of the 143 relevant targets to the UK, we're only making good progress on 24% of those. And the UK government is working on this agenda. So 2019, it did a voluntary national review looking at each SDG and outlining what we need to be doing to achieve them. And there are some more recent figures now on the ONS website of how we're performing against each goal. So now with this mandate from the national government, local governments are working on this too. So London released this report on the right-hand side here just this year, reviewing how the city is contributing to the goals and setting out 5 key recommendations for how we can advance them. And built into those recommendations is this urgent need to use this agenda to build back better and help us recover stronger from the pandemic. And of course, business is such a huge part in London actually being able to deliver this. So I guess we know that London needs business, but let's look at the flip side. Why does business, what are the benefits to actually engaging in this? Well, there's tremendous financial opportunity to start with. Just shortly after the goals were passed, there was a study that was done, an analysis looking at the potential impact of engaging around the goals. And it found that just in a few of the key sectors that would be affected, there's a potential for $12 trillion of new business value every year by engaging with this agenda. So there's a really huge financial benefit if we support the goals. My first bullet points on the slide there, we're looking, I guess, at the kind of macro level. This is a very pro-business agenda. So the SDGs strive for better educated and more productive workforce, for economic and political stability, for more fair and just societies, and these things are all good for business. My second set of bullet points, looking, I guess, a little bit more at the micro level. So engaging with this agenda makes a business more attractive for investors and customers, and we're seeing more demand now from customers who want to buy or want to support businesses which are demonstrating a purpose beyond just profit. And I guess it's not just customers and your investors that are now expecting to see that, but also the people that will work for your business. So as I guess it's proven many times over that the best and the brightest get to choose where they want to work, and where they want to work now are places that are demonstrating what they're doing to this agenda. It improves management of the supply chain, and in turn that will help you save money and resources, helps you build trust and accountability, and also share that global language of sustainability, so that everybody that you're working with can clearly see what it is that you're helping to do to deliver these goals. And I suppose finally, going back to COVID-19, I mentioned the missed opportunity globally in us not making more progress towards the goals, and how that would have left us better prepared for the pandemic. And that applies to business too. Aligning your strategies and your business model with the SDGs is the best way that you can create a resilient, strong, and a sustainable business. So there are a number of free tools and resources to help you understand the SDGs and look at how you can align with them, how you can communicate them, and explore your own impacts with the goals. And if anyone's interested, then you can visit our website, and I can also put a link in the chat later. Today, though, we're focusing on just one of the goals, which is SDG 13, climate action. So let's look at why particularly we're looking at this goal. Climate action is one of the SDGs where businesses of any size can have the biggest impact. And I'm not just talking about you having the biggest impact on the environment and on society, but also about being able to future-proof your business and reap the benefits too. So I mentioned earlier about managing your supply chain. Businesses that look to use and manage resources more efficiently can tangibly reduce operating costs and also increase profitability. I've got a note there on the slide about future-proofing your business and really getting ahead of the changes. And government is setting targets for the UK to transition to net zero. So I guess as an example, by 2030, you won't be able to buy new petrol and diesel cars and vans in the UK. So by getting ahead of this agenda and kind of understanding the changes that are coming ahead, you know that if you are going to be replacing your fleet soon, or perhaps expanding it, that actually making that switch to zero emission vehicles means that you're getting ahead of these changes and actually going to be able to future-proof your business so that you don't incur some of the larger costs that come down the line. And essentially, investors are looking at this. They're looking at how you manage those business risks, how you manage those risks that are disruptions and changes to the supply chain, changes in legislation, I guess how you're actually taking advantage of this, but also how you're responding to the shift in demand. And I guess I've touched on this a little bit before, but particularly when we're talking about the climate, there is such a huge demand from the public that we're seeing now. You know, a couple of years ago, huge rise in the climate strikes that were happening, lots of people demanding that their cities, or maybe even their organizations that they work for, declare a climate emergency. And, you know, these are the people that are making up your customers, and I guess also your investors and your stakeholders, and the people that are going to choose you in the supply chain. And I suppose this is only going to increase in popularity, but this is particularly high on the agenda at the moment because this year the UK will be holding the 26th UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties. Next slide, please. I've got a couple of bullet points, just a little bit about what the COP26 is. And essentially, in November, world leaders are going to be coming to Glasgow to set ambitious targets for reducing emissions. And the UK is really looking to take a leading role in these conversations, which means that the UK government is going to be looking at businesses to take a leading role in reducing emissions. So the government is going to be asking you to do it. Your customers are most definitely going to be asking you to do it. And your competitors might already be acting on it. So there's a real strong mandate for businesses of any size to start engaging with climate action and looking at actions that you can do to reduce your emissions. I think the good news is, by the very act of being here, is that you've already made the first step, at least in looking at this agenda, and I guess the first step in being able to lead the way. So the big question then, what can you do about it? I'll go to the next slide, please. I won't share too much because I know that Jane is going to be diving right into the Race to Zero toolkit. And on the left-hand side is there's a screenshot from the government SME Climate Hub, which links to the climate pledges that Jane will talk about. But it's got full of resources, loads of ideas of actions you can take, and guidance on how you can take that. And I just wanted to mention that the UN Global Compact Network UK is going to be partnering up with the government on the 17th of June to host a 1-hour webinar to take a deep dive into COP26, really explore what it's about, talk about some of those terms that I've mentioned, like net zero, and also discuss some of those practical next steps. I guess I just wanted to go just on my final slide to return to this broader sustainability agenda and take a look at where climate action fits within it. The truth is, we can't achieve any of the other goals that protect the environment or reduce inequalities or lift people out of poverty if we don't take urgent action on the climate. And you can see that I've whited out some of the goals. The ones that are left here on the screen are the SDGs which business can have a direct positive impact on just by taking action on SDG 13. So, for example, looking at your supply chain to reduce your emissions, that will contribute towards Goal 12, responsible consumption and production. Encouraging your staff to take active transport to work, that's helping Goal 3, good health and well-being. Looking at renewable energy, that's Goal 7. Working with your local council on some of their plans and initiatives, that helps Goal 11. Offsetting carbon that you can't reduce, that goes towards Goal 15, and so on. And of course, that's just at the direct level. If you consider the knock-on impacts nationally or even globally, you can then consider how you taking climate action is going to impact this whole sustainability agenda. So I hope that set the scene a bit. I think I'm now going to hand over to Andrew and the rest of the speakers who are going to dive into a little bit more of the practical action that you can take to really deliver this agenda.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again, Jessica. A really great sort of, I suppose, systemic view of all the sort of interconnectedness between the different UN SDGs at the end there, and why bring this focus to climate action doesn't mean we stop doing all the other things, but actually that we can continue to have a positive impact on those other objectives. And I think we should all note that the 17th of June is when that additional workshop is taking place for those that want to find out more about the national sort of effort and push on Race to Zero and COP26. So I'm sure come back to you later, Jessica, as we move into the Q&A. But right now I'm going to hand straight over to Simon from Olwg, who are a Hounslow borough-based business. Indeed, if my memory serves me correctly, you're based in Brentford town centre, so in one of the regeneration areas of London Borough of Hounslow, and quite a young company. So it's going to be particularly interesting to hear your journey towards net zero. Simon.
Okay, I'll just share my slide. Hopefully you can see that. Can everybody see that?
It's just going live now, I think. Yep, all good.
Yeah. Great. So yes, we are a startup company. I guess we're a little bit unusual in that we're not a small medium enterprise who are trying to decarbonize or make our business more sustainable. We actually set up with the express purpose of helping small, medium-sized enterprises and communities find practical solutions to make their businesses more efficient. And by making their businesses more efficient, decarbonize and use less energy. My background, my main interest is commercial, economics and policy. And I spend a lot of time trawling through government policy and UN policies, trying to understand what impact they have on businesses. The problem with policy, or often the policy, is it can be very top-down. Whereas for small, medium enterprises, on-ground experience can be very different. And the reason it can be very different is because, frankly, people who run small, medium enterprises have a business to run. And there are a lot of stresses in that business. Right now, I think it's true to say that a lot of businesses are very distracted by recovery from COVID. And so perhaps sustainability is of less interest. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean by a bottom-up approach, because we believe by taking a bottom-up approach that fits with the essential purpose of your business, you can make some very quick gains. But first of all, what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about perhaps the things that are coming from a policy perspective that you might have no choice about. So there is a 10-point plan for the UK government. I call it Boris's 10-point plan. I think Boris calls it Boris's 10-point plan as well. And on that 10-point plan, there's a whole bunch of things. A hydrogen economy, growth of nuclear power, offshore wind, jet zero and green ships. And yes, jet zero is it's not a spelling error. It is the new buzzword, making air travel jet zero. Transport, greener buildings, carbon capture and storage, protecting our natural environment, zero emissions and vehicles, and also green finance. As a small, medium enterprise or a community project, things like hydrogen and carbon capture and storage perhaps aren't so relevant. So perhaps the more relevant ones are transport, greener buildings, definitely. One of the largest contributors to carbon emissions in the UK is from domestic and industrial heating and from buildings. Protecting our natural environment, zero emissions vehicles and green finance. So what is potentially coming that you won't have much choice about, potentially? I mean, a lot of this is still in policy development, but it is being talked about. So the first thing is there is a huge amount of interest in ESG investing, which is environment, sustainability and governance. And it's getting harder and harder to raise finance for a business unless you have a very, very clear story about what your sustainability plan is. And there's huge interest in that from the investment community. Local energy clubs is something that might come down the line, where energy is becoming more localized and solutions to renewable energy is driven by local communities who own that energy, and it speaks to what we call the circular economy. A good example of that is a project we've been working on, which is the establishment of a hydrogen hub in North Wales, owned by the community to serve local businesses. So that kind of tries to put green energy within the power of local communities rather than big organisations. There will be, it's already been mentioned by Jessica, there will be a ban on petrol and diesel by 2030. There's almost certainly going to be some form of direct carbon taxation in the future, where you will be taxed on the amount of carbon you emit, which means that carbon reporting is going to become absolutely critical to businesses. And that, I think, will be trickled down from large organisations to small organisations. Potentially tax on waste, although we could argue there's already some taxes on waste, such as plastic bag taxes, but we're likely to see more of those. Green finance is going to become a big thing. So those companies with a green plan are more likely to get finance and access to low interest loans. Fuel standards are changing. So we will have in place new legislation on how much biofuel has to be in conventional fuel, and that may affect fleet operators. Greener building regulations, there is a plan to make all industrial buildings at least category B in terms of energy efficiency, which is potentially a huge cost to many of our older businesses and warehousing. And finally, we're going to see an opportunity, and there's going to be an increased value in carbon trading. So if you're running a green business and you are low carbon, there is a possibility that you can trade some of those carbon savings on the open market, which becomes a revenue for you. So they're the things that are coming that you might not have much choice about. So what do I mean by a bottom-up approach? Well, really, it's about how do you drive energy and resource efficiency, recognizing the essential purpose of your business. And this is something that perhaps gets neglected in a top-down approach. You are running a business, and the business does what it does, and it serves a group of customers. And so you can't just throw that business out the window. So you're going to have to start with what the essential purpose of your business is. And our argument or our view is that the best way to look at any business is simply look at how efficient your business is with respect to both energy and resource utilization. Because if you reduce energy, you reduce resource utilization, generally you'll reduce your carbon footprint. And in fact, in the recent IEA report, that's the International Energy Agency, it's recognised that we're underinvesting in energy efficiency, and we're underinvesting by quite a lot. And we're not really making gains in energy efficiency that we should be doing. So we try and start with energy efficiency. So this isn't new. This goes back to the Victorians, and it goes back to somebody called Frederick Taylor, who was born in 1856, died in 1915. And this fell out of fashion, but he came up with what's called scientific management. And he believes that the task of management was to determine the best way for a worker to do the job and provide the proper tools for training. But not only that, to incentivize good performances in businesses to improve the efficiency of a business. So that kind of makes sense. So there is a modern version of that, which some people might be familiar with. It was very fashionable a few years ago, which is the Japanese idea of Kaizen. And Kaizen was made most famous by Toyota, and it probably explains why Toyota became the largest and most successful vehicle manufacturer in the world in a relatively short time. And it's a Japanese word for an improvement, and it refers to the concept of activities that continuously improve all functions and involve all employees. And the really important point of Kaizen is that almost every employee is involved and proactive in suggesting and making improvements on how to minimize the amount of work you need to do to run that business. How can your business become more efficient? So what do I mean by a bottom-up approach? Well, the bottom-up approach starts with your business, your culture, your people. and it tries to drive energy efficiency, environment and energy. And it's a multiple step process, and I'll just explain it at a very high level. It's actually not really difficult to understand, and it's actually relatively straightforward. But the place to start at the bottom is why you do what you do. That might sound a bit odd, but actually describing why you exist as a business means that you capture that essential purpose of your business that you're going to carry into your improvements. Some businesses exist literally to improve environmental well-being or decarbonise. Other businesses exist to serve certain customers. When you know why you do what you do, the next question is, who is your customer? Because your customer needs to be engaged in any transition. Your customers are both the driver for your transition to a more environmentally energy efficient business, but also you can influence your customer to have better behaviours. There's then what you do, how you do it, and what are the difficulties. And what I mean by the difficulties here, what are the difficulties for your business? Where do you face the most difficulties in making money, making a profit, operations? It doesn't necessarily have to be related to environment and decarbonisation. Simply, where are the areas you would like to improve? And then the second bit is, what are the impacts? So what impacts do your business have both upstream, i.e. on the products you produce and pass on, and the supply chain you use upstream, and downstream the products you supply? What are the impacts? Do you know those impacts? And then finally, what ideas can you generate to improve that business? How can you improve your difficulties? How can you reduce your impacts? And how can you improve your profitability? And in fact, this top bit is where the innovation piece comes down. So if you do the bottom bit, the ideas for innovation generally flow. So it's worth taking the time and going through this process. I'm going to use a really simple example because I don't have much time. It's not something we've worked on. It's just a case study I've looked at before. And it's a really simple one. It's the idea of a coffee shop. So what does a coffee shop do? It serves great coffee. Most coffee shops serve the best coffee in town, but they serve great coffee. And what do their customers want? Well, primarily, most customers want coffee that's quick, straightforward to get, and is convenient. But the problem with convenience is disposable cups. So disposable cups, there's about 2.5 billion coffee cups thrown away a year in the United Kingdom alone. Most of those coffee cups are not recycled, and there is a huge amount of embodied energy in those coffee cups. So the obvious answer is, well, get rid of all the disposable cups. But the problem is you now have to go back to your customer and say, well, hang on, if I get rid of all my disposable cups and either make them bring a cup in or make them sit down and have a coffee, they might not come to my place because they might want to go. What about the customer who's forgotten their coffee cup? They won't come to my shop. So you've got to be realistic in what you can do as a business. So there are some difficulties here that I've kind of outlined, and there are people who've looked at this and
two minute warning, yeah. Simon.
Great. They've thought about it very carefully. And there's really two really simple examples. The first one is a company called Cup Club. And Cup Club has this really simple idea that it actually provides to businesses reusable cups, which they then collect in collection points that are either in the coffee shop or elsewhere. They actually process those cups and return them to the shop. So that's great for the coffee shop because, one, you're not dealing with a load of cups you need to wash. Two, you don't have to worry about the fact you haven't got any cups. And three, you don't have to deal with them, but you know they are being recycled. The other one, which is really intriguing, which I've only just come across, is the idea of an edible cup. So there now are on the market, you can have both a cookie and a cup of coffee in one product. So who do you need to help you? So we return to Kaizen, and basically the people who have the most information about how to run the business the best are the people who work for you. So just to finish off, know your business from supply chain to end use. Know your carbon footprint. Carbon calculators are really important. You're going to get those demonstrated today. I really recommend you take time to understand them. They're becoming really convenient now. There's a number of companies that now actually connect carbon calculators to your accounting software because as a business, you account for everything. So if you can automatically account for your carbon, life becomes much easier. Your culture is important. Information, your people need to understand the issues. You need to empower your people. You need to trust them. Your people generally know best. You just have to ask. Incentivization, reward great ideas. And finally, focus on improvement using Kaizen to make efficiency and sustainability part of your day. And I'll just finish very quickly in the last 30 seconds. Why do this? There is a bottom line. So between 2012 and 2018, growth in sustainable investments went from 13.3 trillion to 30.7 trillion. It is growing exponentially. But investors have said that institutional investors, the government worldwide are promoting sustainable investment. Institutional investors are taking the lead in that implementation, and creating businesses of enduring value is a key goal and of key importance to investors. But investors say they cannot readily use company sustainability disclosures to inform investment decisions. So if you can't provide a sustainability disclosure and inform an investment decision, you are not going to get investment in the future. And I think that is the bottom line for doing some of this. And that really brings me to the end of my talk. So thanks very much.
Simon, thank you so much. Huge amounts of ground covered there, and starting to sort of bring it back to some of the everyday realities that businesses are going to have to think through as they make this transition, and as you concluded, make sure they're either investor ready or indeed as a perhaps small business locking in successfully to a larger company's supply chain. I'm sure we'll come back to you with questions towards the end of our 90 minutes, but before we do, I'm going to bring my colleague Jane in to talk us through the Race to Zero West London campaign and the tools that are available. And I think Jane will then hand over to Martina at our partners Climax community to introduce the Climate Essentials tool. Jane.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you to all the speakers. There's so much happening in this space, and it's great to hear about the different types of support for a green recovery at local, national and international level. We still do have a long way to go, and the stakes are very high, which is why we are campaigning for the Race to Zero at West London Business to build momentum towards a decarbonised economy ahead of COP26, where governments must strengthen their contributions to the Paris Agreement. We work with the West London boroughs, the business community, and a range of strategic partners to strengthen the West London supply chain and make it as sustainable as possible and as climate resilient as possible, with the knock-on effects described by Jessica earlier. SMEs are the lifeblood of the economy, and there are over 1 million small and medium-sized businesses in London. And it's now more than ever imperative that we support these businesses as we look to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a snapshot of some of the programs that we're working on. Starting in the top right, the London West Innovation District is to become the Silicon Valley of aviation. We're trying to develop a creative hub and test bed for Jet Zero aviation sector innovations. Bit of a mouthful, but very exciting space. And further down is the Better Futures program, where we are supporting innovation in clean tech by helping sustainable organizations grow and flourish. And following on from the success of the Better Futures program is Better Futures Plus, where we are helping businesses pledging to reach net zero by 2030 to develop their sustainability strategy. Throughout all of these programs, we're developing case studies to inspire others to act. And that leads me on to Race to Zero. Next slide, please. So achieving net zero is becoming recognised as a primary goal of climate change mitigation at the global level. In 2019, the UK became the first major economy to legislate and commit to achieve net zero by 2050, which will inform all future direction of government policy over the coming decades and has major implications for business. Working with our partners, our mission is to use our sustainability programs to inspire local action across West London, and we are encouraging all businesses, no matter what size, to make a commitment and start taking practical steps to reduce their emissions. Setting sustainability targets can seem daunting, but I'd like to reiterate that it will bring significant commercial benefits and future-proof your business in the long term. So how do you do it? First, you need to measure your impact. Measuring your footprint will identify hotspots across your business and within your supply chain so that you can focus on them and set them as a priority. It will also make you much better informed when making decisions. On our Race to Zero page, there are links for free workshops from the UN Global Compact to help you get started. We can also send you a basic carbon footprint calculator, but Martina will be joining us shortly to talk to you about their super easy carbon calculation tool called Climate Essentials. Next step is you need to make a plan. We have a sustainability tools guide, which is jam-packed with resources to help you plan your sustainability strategy. There is information on wider policy guidelines and sector-specific tools so you can track and reduce your emissions at either product, project, or material level, or office level. And you can use product lifecycle assessment analysis tools, LCA. There are also tools that incorporate the social factors and help you understand how engaging socially generates value in your business and your local community. Using the built environment as an example of a sector that we have resources and tools to help you assess the environmental performance of your building. Building on the statistics that Wayne spoke about previously, the operation of buildings such as lighting, heating and cooling systems make up about 40% of the energy use in developed countries. So just tackling that aspect alone will make a huge impact. We also have links to directories of clean tech businesses on the Better Futures program and circular products and services if you're seeking inspiration for green materials, products or services or businesses to partner with. And if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, there is a directory of sustainability consultancies like Olwg, Simon, who just spoke, and sector-specific consultants who can help you with your strategy and help your business reach net zero. Finally, the last step is to make a commitment, and please do let us know about it. The link to the website is at the bottom of the slide. We will promote you on our Race to Zero page and add you to our map. Next slide, please. Some great news is that businesses that make up over half of global GDP have committed to or are thinking about setting a net zero target. This is our interactive map of businesses in West London that have made a commitment. We would love to add your business to it. So how do you set a target? There are different routes you can go down as a business. The Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, BEIS, is encouraging all SMEs in London to make commitments. Just by completing a short form, it's free and they offer incentives and benefits along the way. You can also sign up to the Science Based Targets Initiative, SBTI, and join over 1,000 businesses around the world already committed. SBTI will help you measure your impact using globally recognized and scientifically proven tools and methodologies to help you set milestones to reach net zero. Both of these initiatives are aligned with the Paris Agreement to halve global emissions by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050, which will limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. To sign up, you need to commit to halve your greenhouse gas emissions, achieve net zero by 2050, and disclose your progress annually. There are plenty of initiatives out there, and we've listed many of them in our tools guide. Pick the one that works best for your business and in your sector. Get involved with your borough and let us know about it. We love to hear about the great work that businesses are doing in this space. Next slide, please. To talk a little bit more about the Better Futures program, working with our delivery partners who are Imperial College, Imperial Consultants, the GLA and Sustainable Ventures, we are supporting London's clean tech businesses to make London a beacon for clean tech innovation. These case studies are crucial to advancing the green agenda and inspiring other businesses to act. A couple of examples to talk about. Magway is a West London business that has designed a sustainable transport solution, and it moves goods underground through small pipes. which addresses the explosive growth of online shopping. It uses Hyperloop technology using electromagnetic motor systems for underground e-commerce. So it's very, very cool. Another example is Biome, who use mycelium, which is otherwise known as mushrooms, to eat food and agricultural waste, and they grow quality, very low emission building materials that can then be fed back into the mycelium at the end of life, and it's a completely circular solution. So that's just a couple of examples. We encourage you to explore the Better Futures directory and discover all the 152 fantastic clean tech businesses on it. Or if you're a clean tech business, sign up. Next slide, please. And finally, building on the success of the Better Futures program, we are right in the middle of delivering the Better Futures Plus program, which we are helping 12 businesses in London measure their footprint and make a plan to reach net zero by 2030. The businesses that have been selected are from 4 sectors across film, the creative industries, food and hospitality, and will be showcased by us as brilliant examples of businesses that have committed to reach net zero and the steps they are taking to achieve that. Each business will use their Green Innovation Voucher worth £5,000 to gain bespoke sustainability consultancy and take part in a specially designed course, which is being delivered by the Leonardo Centre at Imperial Business College over a 7-week period. And finally, they will measure their carbon emissions using the Climate Essential tool, which Martina is going to talk about now. And that will help them make their net zero plan with the help of their consultants. So take it away, Martina.
Thank you, Jane. My name is Martina Coleman, and I am a climate change and sustainability engineer working for Climate Community. And with Climate Essentials, our tool, we are helping these 12 businesses in the Better Future Plus program measure and create a carbon reduction plan. So if I can't share my screen. This says something about the host has not been
Rowan will get on the case, Martina, and will activate hosting powers for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
I think it's live now.
I think so, yeah, because my dashboard changed completely. Okay. So Climate Community is a small company. We started operations nearly 1.5 years ago, and we usually hear the discussion about who is responsible to reduce global emissions, to limit global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And our thought process is that everyone can do their part to try to reduce emission to fight global warming. So whether if you're a person or part of a family in a household, whether you're a small or micro or medium-sized business, you can go into the platform, and we make the process of carbon measurement and reducing easy and engaging for different stakeholders. We also provide a carbon analytics platform for a local authority or a trade association that needs to visualize where carbon emissions are coming from different neighborhoods, from different villages, and from different business sectors and sizes. So what I'm going to demo now is the carbon emission platform for a business. Obviously, we're going to ask you a few general questions about your businesses. We realized that there is an increasing interest from businesses to start going on that carbon reduction journey. And sometimes business, especially the micro and the small, they don't have the in-house capabilities to go into that carbon management task, because sometimes it's complex, it's time consuming, and businesses don't have the knowledge, the time, or maybe the money to do so. So with Climate Essentials, we want to bridge that gap, and we try to make it very easy and engaging for a business to measure the carbon footprint. In addition, to become more greener, there are other different reasons why a business may want to start going on the carbon reduction journey, besides because it's the right thing to do. And Jane has touched on a few points. And I've read recently that the UK government wants all businesses that procure for the government to go carbon neutral by 2050. So you have pressures from customer, you have pressures from your employees, you have regulatory pressures, and you also, when you go into that carbon reduction journey, you can discover new business opportunities. So the reasons to start acting is now, and you have several for your business. So once we have your general information, your location, your sector, this section is going to help us really tailor the carbon questions that we're going to ask you for you. We ask you about the numbers of employees that you have, the office space, and the period for which you want to calculate your carbon footprint. You're going to see the estimation button quite a bit across our carbon calculation, because again, we know that most or some information may not be readily available for your business. So with the estimation button, we can provide an accurate estimation on the different questions for your business. We divide the carbon calculations into 4 different sectors that we believe contribute the most to the carbon footprint of our business. First, we ask you about your electricity consumption in pounds, in kilowatt hours, or again, if you don't know it, we can estimate them for you. We ask you if you generate or you buy renewable energy, so that is going to reduce your carbon emissions substantially. The same process we use for gas consumption. Again, we can use kilowatt hours or pound. This information is readily available in your financial data. If you don't know it, we can always estimate them for you. And if you buy green gas, you can click here, and then your carbon emissions are going to be amended accordingly. We ask you about different fuels that you may use within your business premises, for example, district heating. Maybe that is not relevant for the UK, petrol, diesel, or heating oil. Then we move to the transport emissions, where we ask you about the numbers of cars that you have and the mileage for different types of car, petrol cars, diesel cars, or even if you have electric cars. And this is the same for delivery vehicles, for diesel, petrol vans, and maybe some bigger type of vehicles like heavy-duty vehicles. Then we also need to take into account, when you measure your carbon footprint, what transport is the employee commuting. We know that that goes into scope 3 and indirect emissions, and some businesses may not want to measure this at the first stage, but we believe this is a huge source of emissions, and they are not that difficult to calculate. So if you have the time and if you have the information, I think it's a good process to start taking into account the employee commuting for transport emissions. Obviously that takes into account the employee business flights and also the employee commuting. So if you use these slides, you can estimate the carbon emissions that are coming from your employees commuting. We know that 2020 was a special year, so that is why we have included in our carbon calculator a home working emission estimations. This is what was done according to the framework published by EcoAct. So based on the business profile and how many hours a day your employees work from home, how many employees you have working from home, and how often they work from home. Based on this business profile, we can actually estimate the office equipment emissions. These are the emissions that come from printers, laptops, screens, and routers, the heating emissions from your home, and the cooling emissions. This is particularly interesting because we know that because of COVID, most of the emissions, direct emissions from energy that were coming from the office, now have moved to the employee's house, and that is scope 3 emissions, which I know businesses sometimes struggle to measure and estimate. So this gives you a rough estimation on where emissions are coming from in times of COVID. Then we have more details to your indirect emissions, where we can actually add input on your financial data on how much you spend on your business on marketing services, IT services, accounting, legal, pension services, and other type of services that your business may use. We also ask you about your water usage, and if you provide food and drinks for your employees, you can write the expenditure here and the type of food that you provide, and then we're going to amend the emissions accordingly. Lastly, we know that waste is a bit difficult to estimate when it comes to businesses, so we provide an estimation button for general waste, for recyclables, and for food waste if you collect food waste separately. But if you want to add a bit more accuracy, and this is especially relevant for micro and small businesses, you can select the type of bins that you have in your offices and how often you empty it on an average week, and then we amend the carbon emissions accordingly. Once you have gone through a carbon calculation, we're going to provide you with a dashboard where you can see the carbon footprint for the selected period of time. We're going to also benchmark your carbon emissions against a business in the similar sector and similar size as yours. We divide your emissions into scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. This is quite special if you want to start reporting against protocols like the GHG protocol, and then an emission breakdown. We also provide how much businesses in our community have pledged to reduce, because at Climix community, we believe that every little action helps. And when you take into account, you can actually catalyze climate action. Then we go into our carbon reduction plan, where you're going to be able to access different recommendations on how to reduce your carbon emissions. Some of these recommendations you may have done so already. So if you have switched to LED lighting or you have installed your office's walls, if you click here, then these options are not going to appear later on the reduction plan. When you access our carbon reduction plan, you're going to see your original carbon footprint with a breakdown into different sectors, then how much you have pledged to reduce, so you can keep track of your commitments. For example, if we go to transport reduction, you're going to see what happens when you electrify your passenger fleet, what happens when you implement cycle to work scheme for your employees, and what happens when you switch domestic flight for trains or short haul flights for train, or if you try to reduce your long haul flights. And these are some options to try to switch to more efficient fuels for heavy duty vehicles. And the same logic on the right hand side, you can start seeing how by implementing these options, you can start reducing your emissions here in the transport sector. Obviously, if you want to schedule a demo with us, or if you have recommendations on how we can improve this carbon calculation to make it more relevant for your business, please reach out to me, and I'm going to write my email on the chat now. But I think that's it from my part. So thank you, Jane, and thank you, Andrew.
Thank you so much, Martina. As I've said to you before, really looking forward to running West London Business's own numbers through the tool very soon. We used an alternative early this year, and I think discovered that we had around 170 tons CO2 equivalents being produced each year, certainly pre-COVID, as an organisation. Most of that for us as a sort of services organisation, Scope 3 emissions, a lot sort of tied into our events programme and the sort of associated volume of catering and travel that's often required. So that certainly focused our minds on the need to engage with our supply chain and look on many fronts at how we chip away at our carbon footprint. Now, I'm glad we've got about 15 minutes left for questions to our panel. And as I said at the start of the webinar, if you have questions as delegates, or indeed any questions that panel members would like to put to each other, please do make use of the chat window and or put your virtual hand up, the raise hand button at the bottom of the participants list. I'm going to keep an eye on that window. But I have a few questions up my sleeve as chair this afternoon. I'm going to put my first to Jane, which is around the practicalities of using the tool that Martina's just introduced. I know that you're using it at the moment on the Better Futures programme. How many hours or even days is it taking businesses to do their carbon footprint calculation using the tool?
Sorry, just having a mute situation. The tool is quite easy to use. It doesn't take very long. It's just collating the data. So I know Martina and Daniela have worked really hard to make the way that you measure that data easy. So to use an example is they don't ask for kilos of waste, because who knows how many kilos of waste they produce. It's, you know, bin sizes, little bins, big bins. So that just makes it a little bit easier for the businesses. The feedback I've been getting is it doesn't take very long. It's pretty easy. Martina's been helping them with a little initial kickoff meeting, so that also helps. And it's just having the data. So some companies have it very easily, and some companies need to go and find it. But it's generally not too difficult at all.
So not something to be too scared of figuring out for the first time. I think my recollection is it took us a few hours at West London Business to crunch the numbers the first time. Now, of course, when we went through that process at WLB, as I imagine other businesses will find too, that unless you're already at net zero emissions, you've got to start thinking around what you do in the short term, and we've ended up settling on carbon offsets as a kind of interim measure to sort of mitigate that 170 tons of CO2. We opted in the end for a program called the Carbon Club from Forest Carbon. I've just dropped a link into the chat window, and I think we pay probably just under £200 a month by direct debit to them as our investment in sort of projects on sort of UK shores that if we wanted to go and have a look at, we could. But there are lots of complexities to choosing what the right carbon offsets might be for your business. And I wonder, Martina, as our resident expert now in carbon offsets, whether you could tell us a little bit more about some of the considerations.
Yeah, sure. I'm not an expert at all, so I'm going to give you my 2 cents anyway. But maybe Simon also has a few ideas on carbon offsets. I think the first need you need to take into account is that the carbon offset needs to be verified by a third-party auditor. These auditors, for example, the gold standard, they make sure that the carbon offset is real, it's additional, it's measurable, and it's verifiable. What do I mean by this is that you need to, these auditors, they need to make sure that the project actually removes or prevents emissions. Those emissions are not going to happen if the project doesn't take place, and the emissions need to be accurately measured. Obviously, there are several platforms where you can actually buy the carbon offsets. So if you go into the gold standard, for example, you know that they have verified that those projects are actually real and they remove or they avoid emissions. Once you have established that the carbon offset is real and is verified, then you can start selecting the type of projects that you want to support. For example, you have projects such as renewable energy, reforestation, different cleaning ovens in Africa and Latin America. So it obviously depends on your business profile and the type of projects that you want to select. Then you also may want to select your carbon offsets on different locations. If you want to support more local carbon offsets, for example, in the UK, I know that West London have supported, for example, reforestation projects. Maybe you want to support projects in developing countries, in Asia, in Latin America, or in Africa. And then lastly, you need to take into account the price, because the type of project is also going to be affected by the price. Some projects, for example, wind farms in Asia are quite cheap and you can actually get carbon offset for a few pounds. But some other projects might be a bit more pricey, especially when it takes into account reforestation, because that is very difficult to keep track on, to make sure that the trees are not going anywhere after 50 years. And because if you want to go a bit more deep into that, the Oxford University have published the principles for carbon offsetting, and they have divided different carbon offsets into less permanent and high risk of reversal, and then you have projects which are more efficient, and those usually include carbon capture. So it's basically, it takes into account different type of options that you want to have, and it also depends on the business what they want to support.
That sounds like a really useful framework. Can you share the link to that report with us in the chat window for those that want to sort of dive deeper into the detail? Simon, your name was mentioned there. I don't know whether you want to come in with any thoughts on this offsetting challenge, but I'm also going to ask you a secondary question now, Simon, and that is, can you tell us about B Corp? Because I saw B Corp on the first slide of your presentation. What does that mean for your business?
Okay, so I'll talk about offsetting, and I might be a bit provocative and controversial here. So I'm going to go back to a chap called David McKay, who used to be the chief scientist on energy and climate change for the UK, who sadly died for some years ago. He wrote a book called Without Hot Air, which you can get from withouthotair.com. What he said, quite surprisingly, is every little doesn't help. So very, very small changes don't really cut it. So in actual fact, for some businesses where you can't make big changes, you are better off carbon offsetting in projects that really have meaningful impacts. So if you can invest in a solar park, for example, in your local area, that's going to have a much bigger impact than doing very small stuff that might cause you a lot of pain in your business. So I think actually, if you choose, the other thing I'll say about carbon offsetting, if possible, make sure it's big and meaningful. So how much are they genuinely removing from the CO2 budget? And two, if you can connect it with the things your business does, that's great. So if your business happens to use a lot of energy, it's very energy intensive, you use a lot of computers, investing in a community solar park somewhere is exactly the right thing to do. Because at the end of the day, electricity comes down a wire. So so I'll talk about B Corp. So B Corp is a a certification scheme that basically certifies your business as being sustainable. It's not just about the resources you use, it's also about your culture. So it's also about your diversity. How many women do you employ? What's the diversity of the culture of your organisation? What contributions do you make to the community? And we made a very deliberate choice at the beginning when we set up our company that it's not just about doing physical stuff, it's about changing your mindset. So you have to build your culture from the bottom up. We're a startup, so we're going to employ people that sets out your culture as a business. And B Corp fits in with what we do, because this might also sound very strange. Profit isn't our primary motive. Profit is just an outcome of what we do. And what we do is we help businesses make meaningful changes. And B Corp is a way of actually holding you to account to that standard. And I can tell you it's really rigorous. It's really tough to get B Corp certification. You have to meet a lot of hurdles. So at the moment we're B Corp pending, and it's going to take us at least a year to kind of get over all of the hurdles that we need to get over. So we have to have HR policies, we have to have how we treat our workforce, our approach to work flexibility, our approach to investing in education in the community. That all has to be written down. So it gives us a very clear framework. And actually, I would say that in terms of attracting investment, having that stamp will probably be quite powerful in the future. So for those companies that haven't looked at it, I would strongly recommend you look at B Corp, because it really holds your feet to the fire. I don't know if anybody else has done that.
That's really helpful introduction, Simon. And we are seeing a small but growing number of B Corps in West London, which is exciting to see. I'm going to turn to Wayne, but I just want to give a heads up to Sally Smith, who I see is with us from our partners Hounslow Chamber, that I may turn to Sally for some final comments and reflections, find out whether I hope that Sally's found the past 90 minutes inspiring. Maybe we'll get Sally as a future user of the Climate Essentials tool to measure Hounslow Chamber's footprint. But first of all, to Wayne. You obviously sort of set out at the start of or the top of the hour, and in fact, I think we also now have Councillor Dunn with us. So it may be a question to both of you from London Borough of Hounslow. Set out a very detailed and impressive programme that Hounslow is now getting stuck into as you sort of transition the borough to a green economy. But I wondered for both of you right now, what is front and fore of your mind? What's your sort of biggest concern and challenge as you start to take the sort of the baby steps towards that much bigger goal? Wayne,
thank you, Andrew.
Do you want to come in first? Wayne first, and then Catherine, maybe.
So I think we're acutely aware of the sort of immediate impacts on our community, and particularly given our location and in some cases sort of the job provision in West London is so dependent on Heathrow that obviously our immediate focus is around sort of that worklessness that potentially has come from the pandemic. We've over 37% of our population were on furlough related to and that's a huge number of individuals, and I think we're particularly concerned about the individuals that remain on furlough, because if as we start to see business unlocking and that's not generating them sort of being able to go back to work and come off furlough, then there's a real likelihood that they're going to be in a sort of workless scenario. So I think in terms of our overall green recovery and linking it back to sort of the sustainability discussion, we consider that there's a lot of individuals in Hounslow who have worked or still do work in the sort of transport sector, the logistics sector. And there's a real opportunity to sort of promote the green reskilling of some of these, some of our communities and the individuals that have become workless as a result of the pandemic. And I think that focus on skills is critical at this stage, but also focusing on sort of supporting our businesses across the borough, the ones that already exist, but start that process and you know, very much highlighting sort of Simon's point about that bottom-up process as well. As a council, we really want to facilitate that because we've got so much talent within Hounslow. And indeed, some of those individuals who find themselves in that really difficult situation now are so talented, and we don't want to lose that, and we want to invest in those individuals. That's
fantastic.
Really important.
Green skills and working with those that are at risk to make sure that they're in secure employment later in the year. Councillor Dunn, what are your thoughts? What would you like to add to that?
Well, I would agree with everything that Wayne said there, and obviously given the economic situation after the pandemic, and that Wayne's described, with people being on furlough, not sure if they're coming back to jobs, having already lost jobs, in some cases, you know, being let go from jobs, maybe hired back on lower wages. Also, you know, there are all sorts of things happening which mean that certain of our residents are having a not a very good time at the moment, and so that is urgent, but it also presents an opportunity, and Wayne has outlined, and obviously listening here today, there are lots of ideas and lots of opportunities there to bring back something, or not bring back, but bring forth something new that does concentrate on skills, that concentrates on getting people into good long-term jobs, that mean they can stay in the area as well, and that Hounslow won't, hopefully go into a decline. So there's that, and that's just one part of it. Obviously there is masses for us to do, but I concur that's
front and fore of mind. No, that's helpful steer, and of course a big adjustment and transition for our education system to be able to embrace that new green skills.
Yeah, and we want to work with schools. I mean, schools, colleges, in order to bring about those skills. But that also gives us then the opportunity to work with them on, on reducing their own carbon footprints and becoming more sustainable. And that's really the key of what we want to do. It's about working with our communities, working with business, working with schools, because we've all got our role to play. And there are obvious, there are places where we can perhaps hopefully make a difference. In terms of even individuals, in terms of travelling in different ways, working in different ways that can help to reduce our carbon expenditure. Indeed.
And certainly from my conversations with our local college principals and university leaders, they are fully supportive of trying to green their curriculums and come on the journey with other partners. Now I'm hoping that Sally Smith is tuned in and might be activating her camera and microphone. Yes, you are with us, Sally. Fantastic. Welcome.
Yeah, a very interesting afternoon.
It's been a packed 90 minutes. We're just coming to the end. In fact, I'm conscious we're going a few minutes over, but I'm hoping that we can be forgiven. What's your take from a kind of Hounslow Chamber perspective?
I would really like to advertise the toolkit, please, because I like the look of that. We, Hounslow Chamber, are in the enviable position we'd actually embrace and favour offices at West Thames College, so it doesn't really apply to us. But yes, I would very much like to advertise the toolkit. I think the big thing for Hounslow is this 79% direct emissions from gas from sort of council-owned assets. I mean, I know Catherine and I have had various conversations about retrofitting and things like this. So yeah, I think that is the big one. I always quote one of our members, Ormiston Wire, who about 20 years ago embraced the green route, and he only did it basically to save a member of staff. He had to make savings, and so he thought, I've trained these people up I don't want to lose any of them. So he basically cut down his utility bills, he cut down his waste. He is a really good guy to talk to. He's got his windmill. As I say, used to have like a skip a week. He now has a skip maybe once every 6 months.
And that's a wonderful case study. I'm always very fond of that company for being one of the oldest family-owned companies in the UK, but also extraordinary. They make wire for everything from Harry Potter movies through to suspension bridges, which is an extraordinary capability, but good that it's being maintained.
A really good firm.
Green energy. I'm interested, similar to you as a business group. Of course, our energy and electric heating footprint's pretty limited. Where we're finding we're having to focus, of course, is on all the food that we use for events. So we're now starting to encourage more kind of vegetarian and low carbon food options, which can be surprisingly hard to purchase, Sally.
And also interesting to get the point, to get the amounts right, because you never want to run out. But you don't want to, but you don't want to have so much left at the end.
Absolutely, food waste is all part of this. It's wonderful catching up with you, Sally. Great to have you on board with us on this journey. And as we have indeed run over the 90 minutes allotted, just for me to say a huge thank you to all of our panel for your contributions today. Huge amounts of ground covered and lots for us to get stuck into. A reminder up there on screen that westlondon.com/race to zero is where you'll find the toolkit. And if you've got any follow-up queries, want a copy of the carbon calculator, email barney.close@westlondon.com. Thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day.